There's a strange moment most people experience at some point. You look at your life and think, I didn't make any big financial mistakes, so why does everything feel so tight? You didn't gamble your money away. You didn't make reckless choices. You worked. You tried to be responsible. And yet, the future feels heavier than you expected. That's usually when people assume something dramatic must be missing. A higher income, a better investment, one big financial breakthrough. But the truth is quieter than that. Because for most people, the future isn't shaped by one big decision. It's shaped by hundreds of small ones that never felt important at the time. And today, I want to talk about those. Most of us think money works in big moments: the first job, the big raise, the house, the investment that finally changes everything. Those moments are visible, they feel important, they give us something to point to. But the uncomfortable reality is that they're not where most outcomes are decided. What really shapes your financial future happens in places that don't feel dramatic at all, in routines, in defaults, in habits that repeat quietly for years. And because they don't demand attention, they rarely get it. Here's where people usually misunderstand this. We're taught that financial success comes from making smart decisions, and failure comes from making bad ones. But in real life, most people aren't choosing bad. They're choosing normal. Normal spending, normal convenience, normal comfort, normal delay. And normal, repeated over long periods of time, becomes destiny. Not because it's wrong, but because it compounds. Think about how most financial choices actually show up in your life. They don't arrive as spreadsheets. They arrive when you're tired after work, when you're stressed, when you just want things to feel easier. You choose the more convenient option, the slightly more expensive option, the option that saves time, not money. And each choice feels reasonable on its own. That's the key. Almost no small financial choice feels dangerous in isolation. This is why so many people end up confused later. They look back and think, I didn't do anything extreme. And they're right. But they did something consistent. Let me give you an example almost everyone recognizes. Imagine two people with similar incomes, same city, same stage of life. One of them doesn't do anything particularly impressive. They don't chase big wins. They don't obsess over optimization. They just make a few boring decisions. They cook a bit more often than they feel like it. They delay upgrades longer than feels exciting. They automate small amounts without overthinking it. They don't fully optimize, but they also don't ignore. The other person isn't reckless either. They just default to comfort more often. They postpone decisions. They tell themselves they'll fix it later. After a year, the difference is barely noticeable. After 3 years, it's subtle. After 10 years, it's obvious. Not because one was smarter, but because one kept choosing small direction over short-term relief. Here's where psychology matters more than math. Your brain doesn't evaluate decisions by long-term impact. It evaluates them by immediate feeling. Ease feels good now. Delay feels safe now. Comfort feels earned now. And the future version of you is abstract. So small decisions get framed as emotional decisions, not financial ones. You're not deciding about money, you're deciding about stress, time, energy, and relief. That's why logic alone doesn't change behavior. This is also why dramatic financial advice often fails. It asks people to make big, uncomfortable changes all at once. It ignores the reality of daily life. Real life is messy. You're tired, you're busy. You're already managing too much. So instead of asking, what's the best possible move, a better question is, what choice am I repeating without noticing? because repetition is more powerful than intensity. One of the quietest but most influential decisions people make is how they handle friction. Do you remove friction from spending or remove friction from saving? Do you make it easy to spend without thinking or make it easy to follow through on what you already decided? Most people never consciously choose this. They inherit it from defaults, and defaults are powerful. Another small decision that shapes everything is how you respond to discomfort. When money feels confusing or stressful, do you engage or do you disengage? Avoidance feels harmless, but over time it creates a gap between reality and understanding. That gap is where anxiety grows, not because things are bad, but because they're unclear. Here's something people don't talk about enough. Clarity is more calming than progress. You can be early in your financial journey and feel okay if you understand what's happening, and you can be objectively doing fine and feel constantly behind if everything feels vague. Small decisions that create clarity often matter more emotionally than big wins. This brings us to the turning point most people miss. The goal of good financial choices isn't to be impressive, it's to be directional. You don't need to maximize outcomes, you need to reduce randomness. Once your decisions point in a consistent direction, life feels different. Not easier, but steadier. When small choices align, they create momentum. You stop asking yourself the same questions over and over. You stop renegotiating the same decisions every month. You free up mental space. And that mental space is often more valuable than the money itself. Because when your mind is calm, your decisions improve naturally. Let's talk about what this looks like practically without extremes. It looks like choosing systems over willpower, deciding once instead of deciding every day. It looks like adjusting defaults so your future self doesn't have to fight your past habits. It looks like making peace with good enough instead of waiting for perfect. Small actions, repeated, without drama. There's also a deeper layer to this. Small financial choices shape how you see yourself. When you consistently follow through, even imperfectly, something changes. You stop seeing money as something you're bad at. You stop seeing yourself as behind. Confidence grows quietly, and confidence, more than any strategy, changes behavior. So that's why people who seem naturally good with money often aren't doing anything special. They just trust themselves to handle small things. They don't panic, they don't avoid, they don't overreact. They respond. If you zoom out far enough to hindsight, most financial outcomes look inevitable in hindsight. But living forward, they're built invisibly, by how often you check in, by how you handle small discomfort, by whether you choose direction over delay. So if you're feeling stuck, here's a gentler way to think about it. You don't need a breakthrough. You don't need to overhaul your life. You don't need to become someone else. You just need to notice what you're already repeating and ask yourself one simple question. Is this small choice moving me toward clarity or away from it? Because the future doesn't arrive all at once. It's assembled quietly, through habits that feel ordinary, through decisions that rarely announce themselves. And the good news is, that works both ways. Small shifts compound too. Not dramatically, not overnight, but steadily. And over time, those quiet choices don't just shape your finances. They shape how secure, calm, and capable you feel inside your own life. That's the part that matters most. And that's usually how real financial stability is built.